The scent of cinnamon and sage wafted through the crisp autumn air as I arranged the last of my hand-woven textiles across my festival booth. My fingers traced the intricate patterns, designs passed down through generations of my Andean ancestors. The Heritage Festival had always been my favorite event of the year, but today something felt off. Maybe it was the way Miguel had rushed out this morning, claiming he had a crucial meeting on a Saturday. I'm Alea, and until today, I thought I had it all figured out. A thriving art business, a beautiful home, and what I believed was a solid marriage. The festival crowds were starting to gather, and my booth quickly became a hotspot of activity. "These colors are incredible," a young woman gushed, running her hands over a deep burgundy shawl. "How do you achieve such vibrant hues?" I launched into my usual explanation about natural dyes and traditional techniques, when Tabitha, my closest friend and fellow artist, appeared at my side. Her face was pale, and she gripped my arm with unusual urgency. "Alea, I need to show you something," she whispered. "Right now. I'm with a customer. Trust me, this can't wait." Apologizing to the potential buyer, I followed Tabitha through the maze of colorful booths. She stopped abruptly near the festival's entrance, pointing discreetly toward the parking lot. That's when I saw them. Miguel, my husband of 8 years, was helping a tall, willowy woman out of his car. His hand lingered on her lower back as she laughed at something he'd said. The intimate gesture was one I recognized. It used to be reserved for me. "That's Lorelei Shaw," Tabitha said quietly. "She's been working at Miguel's firm for about 6 months." My throat tightened. "You knew?" "I only found out yesterday. I saw them at Cafe Luna. I needed to be sure before I told you." They were walking toward the festival now, completely absorbed in each other. Miguel was wearing the blue sweater I'd given him for his birthday last month. The sight made my stomach turn. "Alea," Tabitha touched my shoulder. "What do you want to do?" I straightened my spine, years of my grandmother's teachings echoing in my head. "Never let them see you break." "I'm going back to my booth." "Are you sure?" "Yes, but I need you to do something for me." I whispered my request, and Tabitha nodded, disappearing into the crowd. I returned to my booth, greeting customers with a smile that felt like broken glass. 20 minutes later, I heard Miguel's voice. "There's my talented wife," he called out, approaching with Lorelei in tow. "I wanted to show Lorelei your work. She's fascinated by indigenous art." Lorelei smiled, all perfect teeth and expensive perfume. "Miguel talks about your pieces all the time." "I bet he does." I met her eyes steadily. "How long have you been sleeping with my husband?" The festival chatter seemed to dim. Miguel's face went from confused to panicked in seconds. "Alea, what are you—" "Don't." I held up my hand. "Tabitha saw you yesterday, and the day before that, and probably many days before that." Lorelei's smile vanished. "Miguel told me you were separated." "Did he?" I turned to my husband. "That's interesting, considering we made love 3 days ago." A small crowd had gathered now. Miguel stepped forward, his voice low. "Let's discuss this at home." "Oh, we will." I began carefully folding one of my shawls. "But first, I'd like Lorelei to know exactly what kind of man she's involved with." "Alea, please." "The kind of man who sleeps with his wife, then takes his mistress to our favorite cafe. The kind who wears the birthday gift I gave him to meet his lover." I looked at Lorelei. "The kind who apparently tells his girlfriend he's separated while still very much married." Lorelei's face had turned scarlet. She backed away from Miguel, shaking her head. "You told me, you said—" "I can explain." Miguel reached for her, but she was already pushing through the crowd. "Lorelei, wait." He shot me a venomous look before chasing after her. The onlookers slowly dispersed, leaving me alone with Tabitha, who had materialized at my side. My hands shook as I continued packing up my booth. "That was incredible," she said softly. "Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I was far from okay. But I was my grandmother's granddaughter, and she hadn't raised me to crumble in public. "Help me pack up. I need to get home before Miguel does." "Of course." Tabitha began carefully wrapping my textiles. What are you going to do? I thought about our house, the one my grandfather had left me, the one Miguel had always assumed was joint property. I thought about the letter in my grandmother's chest, the one I'd never shown him. I'm going to remind my husband what it means to lose something you thought was yours. The house felt different when I walked in, colder, emptier, like a museum of lies. I headed straight for the attic, ignoring Miguel's frantic texts, lighting up my phone. The old wooden stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, each step bringing back memories of the day my grandmother showed me where she kept our family's important documents. "What are you doing?" Tabitha called from below, struggling with my festival boxes. "Getting proof." I pulled the string for the attic light, illuminating decades of carefully preserved history. In the corner sat my grandmother's cedar chest, its brass fixtures dulled with age. The chest's hinges protested as I lifted the lid. Inside, beneath layers of hand-woven textiles, lay a manila envelope. My hands trembled as I retrieved it. "Found it." Tabitha appeared at the top of the stairs, slightly out of breath. "Yes." I held up the envelope. Grandfather's letter and the deed to the house. The sound of a car door slamming made us both jump. Through the small attic window, I could see Miguel's silver BMW in the driveway. "Perfect timing," I muttered, heading for the stairs. "Alea," Miguel's voice boomed through the house. "We need to talk." I descended to find him pacing in our living room, running his hands through his hair, his telltale sign of anxiety. "Yes, we do." I held the envelope close to my chest. "But first, I have a question. How long?" He stopped pacing. "It's not what you think." "How long?" 4 months, he admitted, shoulders slumping. But it didn't mean anything. Lorelei was just, 4 months, I repeated, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "That's interesting, because that's around the time you started pushing me to sell this house." His expression shifted. "The market is perfect right now. We could make a fortune and what? Move into that modern monstrosity you've been designing. Leave behind everything my family built?" "Your family," he scoffed. "This is our house, Alea. We're married. What's yours is mine." I pulled the letter from the envelope. "Actually, it's not." "What's that?" "My grandfather's letter, along with the original deed." I unfolded the yellowed paper. "He left this house to me, specifically, not to us. Not to any future husband. To me." Miguel's face reddened. "That's impossible." When we got married, I never added your name to the deed. Grandmother made sure of that." I met his eyes. "She always said a woman should keep something of her own." "You're lying." He stepped toward me, but Tabitha moved between us. "Back off, Miguel," she warned. He ignored her, pointing at me. "You've been planning this, haven't you? Keeping secrets, playing the victim." "Playing the victim?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been sleeping with another woman in a house my grandfather built with his own hands. The only one playing games here is you." "I want to see that letter," he demanded. "You'll see it through my lawyer." I walked to the front door and opened it. "Now get out." "You can't do this." "I can, and I am. You have until tomorrow to collect your personal belongings. Anything you leave behind goes to charity." He stood there, mouth opening and closing, like a fish out of water. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I hear Lorelei has a lovely apartment." I smiled sweetly, though she might not be as welcoming now that she knows the truth. "This isn't over," he growled, storming past me. "You're right," I called after him. "It's just beginning." Once his car disappeared down the street, my legs gave out. I slid down the wall, clutching the letter to my chest. Tabitha sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "That was badass. I think I'm going to throw up." "That's okay too." She squeezed my shoulder. "What's your next move?" I wiped my eyes, looking around the house. At the walls my grandfather had painted, the windows my grandmother had hung curtains in, the doorframe where they'd marked my height as a child. "I need to call Alan," I said, pulling out my phone. "He's been our family's lawyer since we were kids. If Miguel wants to fight for this house, he's in for one hell of a battle. And after that, I thought about all the artists I knew, struggling to find workspace in our increasingly expensive city, about the community my grandparents had built here, and how it was slowly being erased by luxury condos and chain stores. After that, I'm going to turn this house into something Miguel never could. I stood up, newfound purpose, straightening my spine. A home for art, for culture, for everything he wanted to replace with his sleek, soulless designs. My phone buzzed, another text from Miguel, this one threatening legal action. Let him try, I muttered, blocking his number. This house has survived worse storms than him. Tabitha grinned. Now that sounds like a plan worth fighting for. Alan's office smelled like old books and coffee, a comforting combination that reminded me of afternoons spent playing in his father's law firm, while our parents discussed cases. Now, 25 years later, he sat across from me, examining my grandfather's letter through reading glasses. Your grandmother was brilliant, he said, setting down the paper. The language is crystal clear. The house is yours, exclusively. Miguel won't see it that way. Miguel can see it however he wants. Alan pulled out a thick folder. I've already filed a preliminary injunction to prevent him from making any claims on the property. But we need to move fast on the Art Haven concept. I leaned forward. Why? Because right now, the house is just a residence. If we establish it as a cultural center, it strengthens our position, shows community benefit. He smiled. Plus, it's a brilliant idea. A knock at the door interrupted us. Alan's secretary poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman here insisting on speaking with Alea. Says it's urgent. My heart jumped. Lorelei. No, the secretary checked her notes. Felicity Cooper says she's from the Arts Council. I recognized the name. Felicity was a legend in our local arts community. I'll see her. Moments later, a striking woman with silver-streaked hair entered the office. Alea, I hope you don't mind the interruption. I was at the festival yesterday. Oh, my cheeks warmed at the memory. Don't be embarrassed. Felicity sat down. What I witnessed was a woman reclaiming her power. And now I hear you're planning to transform your home into an artist's sanctuary? News travels fast. In the best way possible, she pulled out a tablet. The Arts Council has been looking for exactly this kind of project. We have grants available, and I have a list of artisans desperate for workspace. Alan cleared his throat. This could be perfect timing. Community support would make it much harder for Miguel to challenge your plans. My phone buzzed. A text from Tabitha. Miguel's here with movers. I'm watching the house. Speaking of Miguel, I showed them the message. Good, Alan said. Let him take his personal items. We've documented everything of value. He handed me a stack of papers. These need to be posted immediately. Notice of business conversion, community space application, historical property registration. I'll help, Felicity offered. I've guided dozens of artists through this process. Another text from Tabitha. He's asking about your grandmother's chest. No. I stood up abruptly. That stays. Go. Alan waved me off. I'll file these today. Felicity, can you meet us at the house in an hour? We should do a preliminary space assessment. Absolutely. I rushed to my car, heart pounding. The chest contained more than just documents. It held journals, photos, pieces of my family's history that Miguel had never shown interest in before. Why now? Pulling up to the house, I found Miguel and two movers, loading his precious mid-century furniture into a truck. Tabitha sat on the front steps, watching like a hawk. The chest stays, I called out as I approached. Miguel turned, his designer sunglasses hiding his eyes. It's an antique, worth good money. It's my family's legacy. Half of everything in this marriage is mine. That chest was here long before you. I stepped closer. And it'll be here long after you're gone. He smirked. We'll see about that. My lawyer says, your lawyer can contact Alan. I crossed my arms. But that chest doesn't leave this house. The movers looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. Fine. Miguel waved them away from the chest. But this isn't over. You keep saying that. I watched as they loaded the last of his furniture. Yet here you are, moving out. Once the truck pulled away, Tabitha joined me in the living room. The space felt bigger without Miguel's expensive, uncomfortable furniture. What now? She asked. Now we wait for Felicity, and then we start planning. I opened my phone's camera and began documenting the empty spaces. This room could hold workshops. That corner would be perfect for a loom. Alea? Tabitha's voice was unusually serious. Your phone was ringing while you were gone. Unknown number. They left a message. I played the voicemail on speaker. Mrs. Griffin, this is a courtesy call. Your husband has been making inquiries about certain financial documents related to your property. Be careful what you sign. Not everyone involved has your best interests at heart. The message ended abruptly. That's cryptic, Tabitha muttered. And concerning. I saved the number. But Miguel's not the only one with connections. A knock at the door announced Felicity's arrival. She entered with the energy of someone half her age, already measuring spaces with her eyes. Perfect bones for a gallery here, she declared. And that light. We could host exhibitions that would make those downtown spaces jealous. Looking around at the empty room, I could see it too, the future taking shape in the spaces Miguel left behind. Whatever he was planning, he'd forgotten one crucial thing. This house had always been more than just property. It was my inheritance, my history, and now it would be my revenge. 3 days of peace ended with the sound of Miguel's key in the lock. I'd been expecting this. Alan had warned me Miguel would try to assert his rights to the house. I just hadn't expected him to bring Lorelei. You changed the security code, he announced, striding into the living room, where I sat at my loom. And the locks, I replied, not looking up from my weaving. You're trespassing. This is still my house. Actually, I finally met his gaze. It never was. Lorelei hovered awkwardly by the door, clutching a leather portfolio. She looked different from the festival, less confident, more uncertain. We have documentation, she said softly, opening the portfolio. From when you and Miguel first moved in together. I set down my shuttle. Why are you here, Lorelei? Shouldn't you be running in the opposite direction? I'm here because... She's here because we're building a case. Miguel interrupted. Joint occupancy, shared investments in property improvements. Funny timing. I stood up, walking to my grandmother's chest. Considering you never showed interest in this house, except to suggest selling it. People change. Yes, I pulled out a stack of papers. They certainly do, like when a man suddenly becomes interested in his wife's inheritance after his girlfriend dumps him. Lorelei flinched. I didn't. Save it. I spread the documents on my work table. Here's the original deed. Here's my grandfather's letter. Here's the property tax records showing I'm the sole owner. And here, I pulled out a final document with flourish, is the business license for the new artists collective. Miguel's face reddened. You can't convert this property without my consent. Watch me. He stepped forward, but I held up my phone. The security cameras are running, Miguel. Every move you make is being recorded. You've lost your mind, he snarled. This revenge fantasy. Revenge? I laughed. This isn't about revenge. This is about legacy. Something you never understood. Lorelei moved closer, studying the documents. Her legal training was evident in the way she scanned the papers. Miguel, she said quietly, these are legitimate. What? The deed, the letter, everything. She looked at him. You never had any claim to this property. That's impossible. When we married, I cut in. My grandmother made sure I understood the importance of keeping this house in the family. You were too busy redesigning the kitchen to notice I never added your name to anything. The truth hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, grabbing the edge of my work table. All those renovations I paid for are documented as gifts, I finished. Alan made sure of that. Lorelei gathered her papers. I can't help you with this, Miguel. There's no case. Lorelei, wait. No. She turned to me. I'm sorry, Alea. I truly didn't know you were still together. But you knew he was married. She had the grace to look ashamed. Yes, I did. After she left, Miguel stood in the middle of the room, looking lost among the half-packed boxes and art supplies. "What happened to you?" he whispered. "You used to be so sweet." "I grew up," I replied. "I stopped being the quiet wife who let you make all the decisions, the one who smiled while you dismissed her art as a hobby. I never. You did. Every time you called my weaving cute. Every time you suggested I get a real job. Every time you pushed to sell this house because it didn't fit your image." A knock at the door interrupted us. Felicity entered, followed by 2 police officers. "Is there a problem here?" one officer asked. "Yes," I said calmly. "This man is trespassing." "This is my house," Miguel protested. "Sir," the second officer stepped forward. "We have documentation showing you're not the property owner. You need to leave." "This isn't over," Miguel hissed, as they escorted him out. "Actually," Felicity spoke up, "it is." She handed me a thick envelope. "The Arts Council approved your grant proposal. Fast-tracked it, given the circumstances. Congratulations, Alea. You're officially the director of the newest cultural center in the city." I opened the envelope with shaking hands, reading the approval letter through tears. "The renovation crew starts tomorrow," Felicity continued. "We'll need to move quickly to meet the opening deadline." "Opening deadline?" She smiled. "The Heritage Festival Committee wants to feature your new space in 3 months. Poetic justice, don't you think?" Through the window, I watched Miguel's car disappear down the street. The house seemed to exhale, as if relieved to be rid of him. "Very poetic," I agreed, running my hands over my loom. "Time to weave something new." Felicity squeezed my shoulder. "Your grandmother would be proud." Looking around at the space that would soon be filled with artists, culture, and life, I knew she was right. This wasn't just revenge, it was resurrection. The sound of power tools filled the house as workers transformed my grandmother's sitting room into a gallery space. Dust floated in the morning light, making the air shimmer like magic. "The lighting tracks will be installed by tomorrow," Felicity said, marking off items on her tablet. "And the climate control system." A crash from upstairs cut her off, followed by cursing in Spanish. "I'll check on that," Tabitha called, rushing up the stairs. 2 weeks in, I sighed, and something still breaks every day. That's renovation life. Felicity led me to the kitchen, now converted into a communal space with long wooden tables. "But look at what's working." Through the kitchen window, I could see 3 artists setting up their equipment in the backyard studio space. One was throwing clay on a wheel, another sketching at an easel, while the third photographed the morning light hitting the garden. "They're already making it their own," I smiled. Speaking of which, Felicity pulled out a newspaper. "Have you seen this?" The local arts section featured a photo of my house, with the headline, "Historic Home Becomes Haven for Artists, a Story of Transformation and Triumph." "The community's talking," Felicity continued. "People are inspired by what you're doing here. And," she lowered her voice, "word is, Miguel's firm is losing clients." I didn't want. "Yes, you did." She fixed me with a knowing look. "And that's okay. Sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding." The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Through the front window, I saw a familiar car. "It's Alan," I said, heading to the door. But when I opened it, I found Lorelei instead. "Hi," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. She looked around at the renovation work, taking in the changes. "It's beautiful," she said. "What you're doing here?" "Why are you here, Lorelei?" She pulled an envelope from her bag. "To warn you, Miguel's been meeting with developers. They're trying to challenge the zoning permits for your cultural center." "How do you know this?" "Because I work for the firm handling the case." She handed me the envelope. "These are copies of their preliminary strategy. I thought you should know." I studied her face. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I was wrong." She wrapped her arms around herself, not just about the affair, but about who Miguel is. The way he talked about you, about this house, I should have seen it sooner. Felicity appeared beside me, taking the envelope. "I'll get these to Alan." There's more, Lorelei said. Miguel's been asking questions about your grandmother's estate. Something about a second property? My heart stopped. The mountain cabin. You never mentioned a cabin, Felicity said. Because it was sold years ago, before Miguel and I met. I frowned. Why would he? The sound of breaking glass upstairs interrupted us. This time, it wasn't construction noise. Someone's in your grandmother's room. Tabitha called down, panic in her voice. We rushed upstairs to find Miguel standing over the cedar chest, now with a broken lock. Security is on their way, Felicity announced, phone in hand. Looking for this, I held up my grandmother's property ledger, which I'd moved to my office weeks ago. The cabin's gone, Miguel. Sold to pay for my grandfather's medical bills. You're lying. He rifled through the chest. Your grandmother would never. She would and did. I stepped closer, just like she made sure this house would stay in the family. She knew men like you existed. Men like me, he laughed bitterly. I made you successful. I gave you connections. You gave me nothing but doubt. I gestured to the renovations around us. Look what I've done without you. Security arrived, accompanied by 2 police officers. As they led Miguel away, he turned to Lorelei. You betrayed me. No, she replied. I finally saw you clearly. After they left, Tabitha helped me clean up the mess, while Felicity called Alan. The chest can be repaired, Tabitha assured me, gathering the scattered contents. It's not the chest I'm worried about. I picked up a fallen photograph of my grandparents. He's getting desperate. Good. Felicity hung up her phone. Alan says desperate people make mistakes, and thanks to Lorelei's documents, we're ready for whatever he tries next. I looked around the room, at the half-finished renovations, the artists working below, the community forming within these walls. The Heritage Festival opening is in 6 weeks, I said. Let's make it something unforgettable. Already on it, Felicity grinned. Wait until you see the lineup of artists wanting to participate. Your grandmother's house is becoming exactly what she always wanted, a center of culture and creativity. Through the window, I watched the sun set behind the mountains, where the cabin used to be. Miguel could search all he wanted, but he'd never find what he was looking for. The real treasure wasn't in property or papers. It was in the legacy being built, right here, right now. And that was something he could never take away. The security alarm blared through the house at 3 a.m., jolting me awake. I grabbed my phone, watching the live feed, as a dark figure moved through the gallery space downstairs. Police are on their way, the security company operator said through the phone. Stay in your room. But when I heard the sound of spray paint hitting walls, I couldn't stay put. I crept down the stairs, phone recording everything. In the gallery, illuminated by emergency lights, stood Miguel, defacing the freshly painted walls with red spray paint. Really, I called out, flipping on the lights. Vandalism? That's your big plan? He spun around, paint can clattering to the floor. You've ruined everything. I ruined everything. I gestured to the red streaks across the wall. You're the one destroying property like a teenager throwing a tantrum. This was supposed to be our future. He kicked over a display pedestal. We were going to sell this place, build something modern, something soulless. I stepped closer, phone still recording. Something that erased my family's legacy. Your family, he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Your precious family. Where are they now, Alea? You're all alone in this museum of memories. She's not alone, a voice called from the doorway. Tabitha stood there with Felicity and 3 other artists from the collective, all in pajamas and robes. We heard the alarm, Felicity explained, moving to stand beside me. Called everyone who lives nearby. Miguel looked around at the gathering crowd, his bravado faltering. This is private property. No, I corrected him. It's a community space, and you're trespassing, again. Police sirens wailed in the distance. You think this changes anything? Miguel grabbed a ceramic piece from a nearby shelf. You think turning this old house into some hippie commune makes you special? Put that down, I warned. It's not mine. Nothing here is yours. He hurled the piece against the wall. The crash coincided with police officers bursting through the door, weapons drawn. On the ground, they ordered. Hands where we can see them. Miguel complied, the fight draining from him as they cuffed him. We have it all on video, I told the officers, sending them the footage, both security cameras and my phone. And witnesses, Tabitha added, gesturing to the group. As they led Miguel out, he called over his shoulder. Check the zoning laws, this isn't over. Actually, Felicity stepped forward, it is. She pulled out her tablet, showing it to the remaining officer. We filed all proper permits and zoning variations, approved last week. Would you like to add harassment and violation of a restraining order to the vandalism charges? Dawn was breaking by the time the police finished taking statements. The artists gathered with cleaning supplies, attacking the spray paint before it could set. Look at this, Tabitha called from near the broken ceramic piece. She held up large fragments. We might be able to restore it. The artist who made it, a young woman named Maria, knelt beside her. Even if we can't, I'll make another, better than before. That's what we do here, Felicity said, putting an arm around my shoulders. We create, we restore, we move forward. My phone buzzed, a text from Alan. Got the security footage, clear violation of restraining order. He'll face charges this time. No judge will look kindly on this. The Heritage Festival opening is in 2 weeks, I said to the room. Think we can be ready? Are you kidding? Tabitha gestured to the artists working together to clean the walls. This just gave us our theme, resilience and community. The show must go on, Maria agreed, carefully wrapping the broken ceramic pieces, and it will be magnificent. We worked through the morning, transforming Miguel's act of destruction into something beautiful. Artists painted over the red streaks, incorporating them into new murals. Maria began sketching designs for a phoenix-themed sculpture to replace her broken piece. Around noon, Lorelei appeared at the door, taking in the scene. I heard what happened, she said. I'm so sorry. Miguel's firm just announced they're placing him on indefinite leave. Good, Felicity replied. Actions have consequences. Lorelei handed me an envelope. The firm is also dropping the zoning challenge, and, she hesitated, I'm starting my own practice, focusing on artists' rights and cultural property protection. I opened the envelope to find a legal document. What's this? A formal statement admitting my role in Miguel's attempts to claim this property. If you need it for the restraining order or any future legal proceedings. Looking around at the transformed space, at the community that had come together to protect it, I made a decision. Keep it, I said, handing back the envelope. But maybe instead, you'd like to be our legal advisor. This place could use someone who understands both art and law. Lorelei's eyes widened. After everything that happened. Sometimes, I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's wisdom. The best way forward is to transform our mistakes into something meaningful. She looked at the artists working together, at the beauty emerging from chaos, and nodded slowly. I'd like that, she said. I'd like that very much. The courthouse hallway buzzed with tension as I sat between Alan and Felicity, waiting for the hearing to begin. 1 week before the Heritage Festival opening, and here we were, facing Miguel's last desperate attempt to claim the house. He's here, Tabitha whispered, nodding toward the entrance. Miguel strode in with his lawyer, looking thinner and more haggard than I remembered. His once pristine suit seemed to hang loosely on his frame. Don't look at him, Alan advised, reviewing his notes. Remember, we have everything documented, the deed, the vandalism, the restraining order violation, and the community support, Felicity added, gesturing to the crowd of artists filling the benches behind us. The bailiff called us into the courtroom. As I walked past Miguel, he grabbed my arm. We can still fix this, he hissed. Just drop the charges, sell the house. Remove your hand, I said loudly, or I'll add assault to the list of charges. His lawyer pulled him away, whispering furiously in his ear. Judge Martinez called the hearing to order, peering at us over her reading glasses. Quite a crowd today for a property dispute. Your Honor, Miguel's lawyer stood. This is more than a simple dispute. My client invested significant resources into the property during his marriage, which were documented as gifts. Alan interrupted, presenting a folder. We have receipts, contracts, and written correspondence proving Mr. Griffin's improvements were voluntary contributions with no expectation of ownership. Furthermore, Lorelei stepped forward from the gallery. I have evidence that Mr. Griffin attempted to manipulate property records through his former firm. Miguel spun around. You treacherous, Mr. Griffin, Judge Martinez warned. Control yourself, or you'll be held in contempt. The next hour was a blur of legal arguments and document presentations. Alan methodically dismantled every claim Miguel's lawyer made, while Felicity presented testimony about the cultural center's impact on the community. Your Honor, Miguel finally burst out, that house was meant to be our future. We were going to build something modern, something profitable, something that erased my family's legacy. I stood, pulling out my grandmother's journal. Your Honor, may I read something? The judge nodded. My grandmother wrote this the day she transferred the house to me. This home is more than walls and windows. It's the heartbeat of our culture, a sanctuary for creativity. Some will try to measure its worth in dollars, but its true value lies in the lives it touches, the art it nurtures, the community it builds. I closed the journal. In 3 months, we've created exactly what she envisioned. 23 artists now have workspace. We offer classes to underprivileged youth. Last week, we hosted a cultural exchange that brought together artists from 5 different countries. And the Heritage Festival opening? The judge asked. Is next week, Felicity confirmed. We have over 300 registered attendees, including the mayor and the Arts Council board. Judge Martinez removed her glasses. Mr. Griffin, what exactly are you hoping to achieve here? Miguel stood, straightening his jacket. That house has significant market value. That's not what I asked. The judge leaned forward. What are you hoping to achieve by destroying something that clearly benefits the community? The courtroom fell silent. Miguel opened his mouth, then closed it again. Your Honor, his lawyer began. But the judge held up her hand. I've heard enough. She picked up her gavel. The property clearly belongs to Ms. Collins, both legally and spiritually. The restraining order will remain in place, and Mr. Griffin will pay restitution for the vandalism damage. The gavel struck. Case dismissed. The artists erupted in cheers. Miguel slumped in his chair as his lawyer gathered their papers. Outside the courthouse, Felicity hugged me tight. Now we can focus on the opening. About that, Lorelei approached, holding up her phone. The story's already hitting social media. Art triumphs, overgreed is trending locally. Great publicity for the festival. Tabitha grinned. Alea, Miguel's voice called from behind us. I turned to find him standing alone, his lawyer already gone. It's over, Miguel. I know. He ran a hand through his graying hair. I never understood what that house meant to you. Not until I lost it. You never lost it, I replied. You never had it to begin with. He nodded slowly. Your grandmother would be proud. Yes, I agreed. She would. As he walked away, Felicity checked her watch. We have 7 days until the opening. The new murals need finishing. Maria's Phoenix sculpture needs installing. And we need to celebrate, Tabitha interrupted. First round's on me. Looking at these people who had become more than friends, who had become family, I felt my grandmother's presence stronger than ever. Actually, I said, let's celebrate at the house. There's something in my grandmother's chest I've been saving for a special occasion. Her special occasion wine, Alan grinned. The one we were never allowed to touch as kids. Exactly. I linked arms with Tabitha and Felicity, because sometimes victory deserves more than just justice. It deserves a proper toast. Together we walked toward the future my grandmother had always envisioned, not just for the house, but for all of us who now called it home. The Heritage Festival hummed with energy as I adjusted the last textile on display. Through the open windows of what used to be my living room, now our main gallery, I could hear the growing crowd outside. 5 minutes until doors open, Tabitha called, rushing past with an armful of programs. The line goes around the block. Maria's phoenix sculpture dominated the entrance hall, its broken pieces reformed into something more beautiful than the original. Along the walls, photographs documented our journey, from the vandalism to the restoration, from destruction to rebirth. Ready? Felicity appeared beside me, clipboard in hand. Almost. I reached into my grandmother's chest, now restored and serving as the gallery's centerpiece, and pulled out her old shawl, the same one I'd been selling the day I discovered Miguel's betrayal. Perfect touch, Felicity smiled as I draped it over my shoulders. The doors opened, and people flooded in. Artists guided visitors through their workspaces, explaining techniques and sharing stories. In the garden, children tried their hands at weaving and pottery while their parents watched in delight. Alea, Lorelei waved from near the community bulletin board, where notices for upcoming workshops and events covered the wall. The mayor's here. I made my way through the crowd, stopping to greet familiar faces. Near the kitchen-turned-cafe, elderly neighbors who'd known my grandparents wiped tears as they saw how we'd honored the house's history while breathing new life into it. "This is extraordinary," the mayor said, examining Maria's phoenix. "A perfect blend of tradition and innovation." "That's what we aimed for," I replied. "A space where the past and future could coexist." A commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Miguel stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. "I'll handle this." Lorelei started forward, but I stopped her. "No, it's okay." I approached my ex-husband. "The restraining order doesn't cover public events." "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quietly. "I just needed to see it." I studied his face, the dark circles under his eyes, the humbled set of his shoulders. "Come in," I said. "But remember, this is a sanctuary now. Respect it." He nodded, following me through the gallery. We stopped at a wall of community artwork, where local children had painted their visions of home. "You were right," he said finally, "about everything. This house, it was never about property value. No, it wasn't. I keep thinking about your grandmother, how she saw this coming, protected you from people like—" He swallowed hard. "Like me." Before I could respond, Maria appeared with a group of young artists. "Aliyah, we're ready for the demonstration." In the backyard studio, artists had set up stations showcasing different cultural techniques. I took my place at my loom, beginning to weave as I explained the patterns to the gathered crowd. "These designs tell stories," I said, my hands moving with practiced grace. "About family, about resilience, about transformation." From the corner of my eye, I saw Miguel slip away. Through the window, I watched him pause at his car, look back at the house one last time, then drive away. "Good riddance," Tabitha muttered, appearing beside me. "No," I smiled, continuing to weave. "Good lesson." The day flowed like a well-choreographed dance. Artists shared their crafts, visitors shared their stories, and the house seemed to glow with renewed purpose. As sunset approached, Felicity gathered everyone in the gallery. "A toast," she announced, raising a glass of my grandmother's special occasion wine. "To Alea, who showed us that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation." "To the artists," I added, "who proved that community is stronger than conflict." "And to this house," Lorelei chimed in, "which was always more than just walls and windows." As the crowd dispersed into the evening, I found myself alone in the gallery. The phoenix sculpture cast intricate shadows in the fading light, its broken pieces now an integral part of its beauty. "You would love this, grandmother," I whispered, touching her shawl. "She does," Felicity said softly from the doorway. "Can't you feel it?" I could, in the laughter of children discovering art for the first time, in the grateful tears of artists who finally had a space to create. in the way the old house had transformed without losing its soul. The next workshop starts Monday, Tabitha reminded me, joining us with a stack of registration forms. We're already full with a waiting list. Then we'll add more sessions, I decided. This house has plenty of room for growth. Looking around at what we'd created, not just a cultural center, but a living, breathing testament to resilience and community, I finally understood what my grandmother had protected all along. It wasn't just a property to be passed down, it was a legacy to be lived. Come on, I said to my friends, my new family. Let's clean up and get ready for tomorrow. We have more stories to weave. And in the gentle evening light, the house seemed to settle contentedly around us, as if knowing it had finally become exactly what it was always meant to be, a home for art, for healing, for hope.